Welcome to our first in-person meeting since March 2020. I'm 17 months. I'm Byron Huff, for most of you know, but I assumed role of FFBC president this past February. Of course, during pandemic and Zoom meetings, which we had been doing since April last year, we turned that around very quickly, and I think we got a little better at it towards the end. But this is my first meeting to host in my new role at Hoyt Sherman. So I'll go through the normal things. We have a few new people. FFBC is an association of gay, bi, trans men formed in 1996. It's a 501c3 entity making your contributions tax deductible. Since formation, FFBC has raised more than $450,000 for scholarships that are awarded annually to high school seniors who have done significant things to reduce homophobia and educate about LGBTQ issues in their schools and communities. We've awarded $3,000 scholarships regardless of gender, gender identity, sexual orientation, and other protected characteristics. But we awarded 9 $4,500 scholarships in July due to the generosity of our donors this year. That's amazing. We raised more than we ever had in the history of FFBC. If you've not donated this year, we're now starting a new year. So what gets given now will be awarded depending on when we do it. We usually do it in June. So June 2022. If you've not donated, please, I hope you will. You can make one-time or set up a recurring donation, which is new on our website at ffbciowa.org. Thanks to the technology funded by Brad Holland, Joe Rates, and Descendant Wealth Management Group. We hope 2022 will allow us to present scholarship recipients with their award during their graduation ceremonies, because the real strength of the scholarship program, aside from recognizing and rewarding significant and often courageous acts of the recipients, is the opportunity for FFBC to send a representative to the high school graduation ceremonies throughout Iowa, often in front of an audience that thinks they've never seen a real live gay person. Hard to believe, but there's probably areas like that. There are new member forms. I think David has them at the front desk, yes. So new member, or if you have any information, your email has changed, I would encourage you to fill that out. We do send 2 emails monthly, so you shouldn't get a lot of information. One is the Sign Up Genius meeting announcement 1 week prior to each meeting. And the second is FFBC newsletter that's sent the Monday prior to each meeting from ffbciowa.org. So if you aren't receiving those, maybe check your spam folder, or we have an incorrect email address. If you've not read the August newsletter emailed on August 2nd and available on our website, I would encourage you to open it and see the list of 9 scholarship recipients and talk about why they were awarded that. And I did sit on the scholarship committee this year for the first time, and it is difficult. You read through them and you think about, they get letters of recommendation. I mean, there's a packet of things they have to do to apply. So it's a lot of work, and they all earned it. The articles will tell you what they did. And well, of course, we have our other articles. The newsletter, in fact, this time was the longest I've seen, and but it's just so excellently well done. Wade Peterson is handling that, and he is not in attendance this morning. Oh wait, he is in attendance. So Wade, oh, yes, sorry. The newsletter, now that we've gone online and in full color, we're not mailing it, I know, but you can open it and print it if you'd like. And I think it's just amazing. You can designate FFBC as a beneficiary on your United Way donations. You do have to just write it in. You just click other and write First Friday Breakfast Club. Amazon offers Amazon Smiles. So just literally go to Amazon and type in Amazon Smiles, or in Google, and you can make that your default. And that's the only thing you have to do. And as long as you buy things under Amazon Smiles and designate FFBC as a beneficiary, we actually get contributions. It's not a lot of money, but the more people that do it, it adds up. On our website, you'll find links to resources that we are continually updating and adding. We have archived monthly newsletters. We're adding audio recordings and YouTube videos even of past speakers. Thank you to David Cotton, who is our technical person, as you can see, and making this possible this morning. But, thank you to David Cotton, Nicholas Williams, who is not here, but he is a straight ally that has just been amazing and has been so helpful with the website and set up some things for us. Wade Peterson, I mentioned, Joe Rates, who is not here. They're all working on updates for the website. And thank you, David and Nicholas, both for the Zoom meetings. David was instrumental in setting this up. This is the first virtual presentation in our 25-year history. Thank you to Scott Kumpino for the book exchange back on the piano, or I think that's a piano, by the registration desk. There's no checkout system. Simply borrow and return as you wish. And you can also donate books you feel might be of interest to make Scott carry more books. It's a workout. At this time, we would like to give new attendees of FFBC the opportunity to introduce themselves. I think there's a couple.
I'd like to introduce Rich Banyard, who lived here in the 1980s and returned here for retirement.
Welcome. Welcome. Oh, wow. Wow. Thank you. Welcome. Well, it's a little bit cooler here than Las Vegas. Wow. Welcome. You might be the person the farthest away. I don't know. Someone could argue that, but Ames is a bit of a drive. I'm glad you made the trip. Okay, anyone else? Okay, well, thank you. Welcome to all of everyone attending. So happy to be here. Announcements. The next copy deadline for the newsletter is the second Monday prior to the breakfast meeting. So the next deadline will be August 23rd. If you have something you'd like to share, send a copy to info@ffbciowa.org. Our next board of directors meeting will be this coming Tuesday, August 10th at 6:30 p.m. Please let me know if you'd like to attend. We're still deciding the location, since I think we might do a live one in person. We haven't done that since last year either, and doing Zoom. Let's see. Now, I guess David will do the introduction for our speaker. David.
Good morning. And first, I want to thank Phil for the vegetarian, non-cheese breakfast option this morning. I appreciate that. Today, our speaker is Ian Lawrence Tourinho. Actually, he's from California, so give him some grace. It's really early. He really stretched to get up this morning. I know I would have had a hard time doing that, but I've never met him in person. We actually met in an online Zoom group of LGBTQ+ men. We met for about 8 weeks and had some interesting conversations. And when he introduced himself, he did such as a professional bisexual. That was his first thing out of his mouth, which really intrigued me, and said, when I heard that, I want to know more about him and invite him to FFBC. And that's why we have him today lashed up on the screen. He is the director of the American Institute of Bisexuality and heads amBi, a growing network of socially focused bi communities. And as an activist, he is particularly interested in mutual support networks as a health and human rights intervention of bi people. In 2014, he was branded as the new face of bisexuality by the New York Times, and then put on the picture of their magazine, the front cover. And on June 26th this year, he wrote an article you can pull up on their website called June 26th, A Day That Changed My Life. For that was the day in 2015 that the US Supreme Court struck down and extended marriage equality to all 50 states. And then in fact, in 2017, he married his partner of 10 years, Jose. So please welcome Ian Lawrence Tourinho to the first Friday Breakfast Club, and let's hope the technology works.
Hi, can you hear me? Great. Okay. Oh, no, I get to see you guys. All right. All right. So yeah, like Dave said, we took a class together a couple months ago, and yeah, I am one of a few professional bisexuals in the world. I wasn't quite sure where you all were coming from, so I kind of put a presentation together that's a bit of everything. It's 3 parts. The first part is basically, you know, who I am, my organization, what we do. The second part is a little detour into history because I think it helps clarify a lot of the confusion around sexual orientation that's out there these days. Maybe that's not a theme for you guys, but in my work, I come across that a lot. And then the last part is sort of a bi 101 crash course. So you're all going to leave semi-experts on bisexuality today, hopefully. And let's see the technology works, and I will move into the presentation. Let's see, can you see that? Okay, I hope you can see that. All right. So that's me. That's me on our office building roof. There's some contact information, how you can find me on social media, Ian Tourinho everywhere, or just ian@bi.org. And so like Dave said, my organization is the American Institute of Bisexuality. We were founded by Dr. Fritz Klein in 1998. We are also a 501c3. Fritz was a psychiatrist and sex researcher, and back in the 70s, he wanted to read about bisexuality and looked in the New York Public Library and everywhere else he could, and there was basically no research. So he realized he had to create it himself. So he started writing a book. It became The Bisexual Option, and it was sort of a summary of everything he could learn and figure out about bisexuality. And he also started the Journal of Bisexuality a little later in 2000, which is still the only academic journal that focuses on bisexual topics. And another thing he did was create the Klein sexuality grid, which, if you know the Kinsey scale, this is one of my favorite representations of it. It basically ranks people's attraction, whether it's same sex or different sex, along a scale. And as you hopefully know, everything in the middle is bisexual. People seem to think it has to be 3 smack in the middle, but it's actually any combination of same sex and different sex attraction. So Fritz Klein kind of made his mark partially with this sexuality grid, which still gets used by sex researchers, and it expanded on the Kinsey scale to show that that sexuality is more complex. We have things like attraction, behavior, fantasies, what we want our life to be like, where we like to socialize, things like that. One of our many projects is bi.org. That's sort of our main public outreach and education site. It has very accessible sort of 101 level introduction to bisexuality. And then amBi, oh wow, everything's moving. amBi, like Dave mentioned, is our social club. We have 10 chapters in 3 countries on 3 continents. And we basically just try to create bi visibility because that's the opposite of bi erasure, which is a topic we'll touch on in a minute. And we did things, I don't know if you guys know who the Try Guys are, but they came to our Pride and we like to make a big splash. And come on. Oh, all the videos are freaking out. Okay. And one of the things I'm very proud of that we did is we started, so September is Bi Pride Month. It sort of centers around Celebrate Bisexuality Day, which is September 23rd. And here in LA, we started the world's first Bi Pride sort of separate event that happens in West Hollywood, which is sort of the gayest neighborhood of Los Angeles. And since then it has started, they have one in London, there's gonna be one in Hamburg this year, and there's a bunch of others that have followed suit. So we're trying to set a good example. Another project of ours is called Queer Majority, where we try to have a little bit more edgy, cutting edge, more 201 or more advanced discussions about LGBT issues with a center on bisexuality, basically conversations that aren't happening elsewhere. So now I wanted to take a quick detour. This might seem weird, but there's so much misinformation being amped up these days on social media, and it's about just about everything, but also about sexual orientation, bisexuality, things like that. So I want to introduce you to what I'm going to say are 5 heroes and 1 sort of villain. because I'm surprised how many people have never heard of almost any of these people, except maybe the villain. The first one I want to introduce you to is Karl Ulrich. He is the world's first LGBT activist. In 1867, he got up in front of a room of lawyers and argued basically for LGBT rights, saying that it was inborn and that it was wrong to discriminate against us. And he already, back in the 1860s, came up with a very complicated system for what we call, LGBTI, QQ, IA, all that kind of stuff. So he had 15 terms already back in the 1860s, because you often hear on social media, oh, it's only right now that we've figured out that sexuality is more complex, that there's more gender identity. No, they already knew about that in the 1860s. And when I first read about this, because his term for gay was Iranian, I thought, oh, that's so ridiculous. Nobody ever thought about that again. I thought it was sort of a dead end. And then I was reading about Bob Miser, who some of you may know from the Athletic Models Guild and Physique Pictorial back in the 40s, 50s, 60s. And I found accounts of him running around LA's gay area, referring to himself as an Urning. So these ideas got out. And if you don't know, Bob Miser, he also helped popularize Tom of Finland, which is the drawing down below. And they helped create an idea of gay identity and of culture, and to really take homosexuality out of the shadows and be something that one could be proud of. They created depictions of like a strong, healthy, happy gay male, which was revolutionary, back in the 50s, well before Stonewall. The third hero I want to introduce you to is Kurt Benny. He is the person who came up with the whole concept of sexual orientation, because they were basically trying to figure out how to fight the criminalization of same-sex behavior. So he came up with the terms homosexual and heterosexual, and specifically argued that we shouldn't really worry if it's born that way or not. The government has no right to interfere with our freedoms, basically. So all the way back in the 1860s, there was still debate, like, are we going to go the born this way route and say we can't help it? Or are we going to talk about we have these freedoms that the government shouldn't infringe upon? And then Richard von Krafft-Ebing, he's not as important to know about, but he's the person who coined the word bisexual, meaning having both same-sex and different sex attractions. He combined Kurt Benny's two terms in 1892. So the bisexuality has meant the same thing since 1892. And then Magnus Hirschfeld, hopefully you know about him, but he founded the world's first LGBT organization in 1897. And I like to think of him as our precursor, because he was also a science-based organization. He thought that we could create justice for LGBT people through science, through understanding, why people are LGBT and our different needs by studying empirically. And one thing that was really interesting is in 1900, he created this big public petition of very prominent Germans to try to decriminalize homosexuality, and Einstein signed up prominently with it, as did Krafft-Ebing, the guy who invented the word for bisexuality. Because you often hear on social media that all the people that first started talking about homosexuality, heterosexuality, were all doctors trying to pathologize us and treat us like we're sick, but that doesn't quite vibe with the actual history. Hirschfeld toured the US in 1931 as the Einstein of sex, which I thought was funny. And then in 1819, he created the Institute of Sex Research, which was basically, for better or worse, kind of like a Planned Parenthood now. I know it's controversial in some places, but he did hormone replacement therapies, gender affirmation surgeries, documents for trans people, contraception, fought for abortion rights, and had over 20,000 visitors a year. And again, this is 100 years ago, which I mean, maybe you all know about this, but I had never heard about this until I started, diving into the history. And here's our villain, Sigmund Freud. So he actually took us on a huge detour, because, like I said, people had kind of figured out the basics of LGBT, why we are the way we are, the framework, everything, about 100 years ago or more. And he had this idea that basically his concept of pansexuality was that everything we do is infused with like these sexual issues. So, you must have penis envy or, Oedipus complex and stuff like that. So that really took psychology on this big detour, and law as well, thanks to Sigmund Freud, whose influence used to be gigantic. And then unfortunately, Magnus Hirschfeld's work was one of the first targets of the Nazis when they came to power. On the big book burning on May 10th, 1933, they ransacked his building and took all his archives and stuff and burned whatever they could. Although some of it managed to get out, and some of it's actually stored in the One Archives here at USC in LA. But all was not lost. His Institute of Sex Research led to the Chicago Society for Human Rights, which was the first LGBT organization in the United States, which then also led to the Mattachine Society here in LA and then in other cities as well. So now we're going to go back to the Bi 101. And just to be clear, bisexuality is a broad, I can't even read it because broad and inclusive term that describes physical attraction, romantic attraction, or sexual attraction that is not limited to one sex. And will it go? No, oh, now I made it mad. Okay, here we go. That means not limited by sex or gender. So one of the concepts I wanted to introduce you with briefly, like I said, this is a crash course, is what I like to call the AIB model, partially because it's the name of my organization. But the idea is basically that sexuality is made up of three main components: identity, behavior, and arousal, or you can call it attraction. So attraction is, to whom am I, sorry, losing this, romantically or physically drawn. Behavior is with whom am I intimate, and it brings up issues of choice and freedom and opportunity. And then identity is, how do I think of myself and my sexuality? And partially because the influence of queer theory, people only talk about identity these days. But I think to really get a complete picture, we need to look at these three components. Just wanted to make sure you all knew that bisexuality is any combination. It doesn't mean some magical 50-50 equally attracted to all genders or to men and women or any other thing like that. It's any combination. It's just not limited to one sex or gender. And this is something that not everyone realizes. This is a meta study that the Williams Institute did in about 10 years ago. They looked at, how many this is? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different studies from around the world, and came up with the conclusion that bisexuals are the majority of the LGBT community. There's a little bit more bi men than there are lesbians, and the number of gay men and bi women is roughly equal. But the numbers are growing. This is a study that they just released earlier this year, but it was done last year. And the younger the generation, the more people are bisexual or out as such. So that is something to keep in mind when you're doing LGBT advocacy is, if you don't have bi people around, where are they? Because they should be a significant portion of what you're doing. Another concept I wanted to introduce you to was identity maintenance. It's a little different than the coming out process. If you come out as gay or lesbian, when you say you're gay or lesbian, people are like, oh, great, they picked where they are, done. But if you come out as bisexual, people will constantly ask you, oh, are you still bisexual? Have you made up your mind? Oh, you have a boyfriend now. Okay, so now you're really gay. Or, and that's not something that is expected of other sexualities, And it even happens in the public sphere, like Anna Paquin from True Blood. She's married to a man, actually one of her co-stars, and she constantly gets asked, "Oh, so are you still bisexual? Oh, so are you still bisexual?" As if it's this constantly temporary thing. And the research that's been done, Lisa Diamond out of the University of Utah has looked into this a lot, and in her studies, at least of women, bisexuality is more stable than gay and lesbian identity. So something to keep in mind. An important concept, if you're going to think about bisexuality, is bisexual erasure. And that is various ways that people dismiss or erase or just disregard bisexuality in general, including deciding that it doesn't exist. Kenji Yoshino, who's a legal scholar who is not bisexual, I think he's gay, wrote a huge 100-page thing for the Yale Law Review that you can look up if you would like. But basically, he talks about how both straight people and gay and lesbians have an interest in erasing bisexuality because it makes them uncomfortable. If you're gay or lesbian, it kind of brings up the idea like, well, is it a choice that I'm gay or lesbian? Also, there's sort of icky factors in terms of like, are bi people just kind of visiting, what do you call it? Sex and the City actually had a whole line about this. They're just visitors to gay town. Is this just a recreational thing? Are you kinky? And which also touches on the issue of monogamy, because our society, it kind of expects us to settle down with someone at the end. So why is your bisexuality even relevant? And if you are married and you tell people you're bisexual, does that mean your marriage is falling apart? Or does it mean you're looking to be a swinger? So these are added stressors that comes into the bisexual experience. And one thing that bi.org covers a lot is different bi celebrities and bis in media and stuff. And Freddie Mercury here, for example, is a great example of somebody who's been subjected to a lot of bi erasure. You'll tell people that he was bi and they'll look at you like, are you insane? When he was alive, they tried to make him seem straight as much as they could. And then since he's been dead, they basically made him try to seem gay as much as he could. If you saw the Bohemian Rhapsody movie, they kind of made it seem like being gay was what destroyed the whole band and his life, which wasn't very nice. But in his actual life, he had at least 2 longer-term female partners, 1 longer-term male partner, and he left a huge part of his estate and dedicated songs to the women in his life. So that's pretty clearly bisexual, but you'll very routinely find him labeled as gay. Lady Gaga has repeatedly come out as bisexual. Her song Poker Face is about being bisexual, but the media will often refer to her as an ally and not as a member of the LGBT community, as if the B weren't there. Very recently, just last week, Cardi B got mad because basically in some of her videos, she's shown with other women and people were accusing her of queer baiting, of basically performatively throwing in, titillating sort of same-sex issues. And she's like, I know I'm bisexual. So it goes on to this day that bisexual is somehow considered not really LGBT. That should stop. And even this is another example of bi erasure. Ennis, at least the one, Heath Ledger in the beige hat, was very clearly a bisexual male, but everywhere referred to these characters as gay cowboys. And I even went to a presentation, those shirts that they had, if you remember, they're in a museum here in LA now. And some of the screenwriters were there, and I asked them, were these bisexual men? And they looked at me like I was from Mars. But in the movie, they both have relationships with women, especially Ennis on the right. He has multiple girlfriends, so that's pretty bisexual. This is sort of the cycle that our work approaches, is basically, people don't understand what bisexuality means. So if you are bi, it's hard to even figure out where your place is in the world. Society doesn't really understand when you come out to your parents. There aren't really models in TV. So there's really no upside to coming out as bi. And it's just this cycle of bi erasure, biphobia, and the minority stress that comes from being something that society doesn't really understand. I'm not saying it's not easy to be, that it's not hard to be gay or lesbian, but at least society kind of has a concept of what that means. And bisexuality still remains a bit elusive. And because of that, not that many bi people are out. And if you don't know many bi people, that could be a very good reason why. Although I'm so out that you'd be surprised, people that I even think are gay, they're like, oh, really, really, I'm bisexual constantly. Especially with men, the percentage is like 19% or less that are really out to most people in their lives. In general, I think the same 2017 study found that 23% of bi men are even significantly out at all. And I'm a little hesitant to do this. If you talk to a lot of other bi activists, they will tell you basically how poor we are, how high our sexual violence rates are and stuff like that. That's what the data plays out. Although some of it, like for instance, our poverty is also kind of tied into the fact that bisexual people tend to be younger. But one reason I'm hesitant to focus on this too much is because you don't quite know what people will make of this. In the 90s, there was a study that came out that said when people come out as gay or lesbian, their mental health goes up. So a whole generation of psychologists decided, okay, when bi people come to me, I need to tell them to come out as gay or lesbian instead, because then their mental health will go up. So you don't always know what people are going to do once they get with information out there. But please just realize that it has like health and well-being ramifications, all this minority stress and erasure and things like that. And even though we have all those issues, very, very, very little funding ever goes to any kind of bisexual stuff. I mean, it's literally, if you look at like trans, gay, lesbian, there'll be tens of millions of dollars every year, and it's under usually under like $50,000-$60,000 a year in the whole US that goes out to bisexual issues. This is grants being given. Fortunately, Fritz Klein left us a bit of an endowment, so we are able to do our normal operations without outside funding. But if we were dependent on that, we basically could do nothing, which is one of the reasons there is so little bi representation and advocacy out there. Just one of the last things is there are many identity labels out there right now. You know, pansexual is one of the more common ones, omnisexual, multisexual. I have mixed feelings about how useful that is. They're all different. They all basically describe bisexuality. So we have this concept called the bi umbrella, basically to pull everyone in under one banner so that we can work together. And as Dave talked about, the New York Times the New York Times Magazine, which comes out on Sundays, did a cover story about us. And if you want to look it up, it's called The Scientific Quest to Prove Bisexuality Exists. It's a little bit of an unfortunate title, but that's the way it works with clickbait titles and stuff these days. I'd say it's more the scientific quest to prove how bisexuality exists, or like the ways it exists, but not that. But there you have it. And then again, that's me. So thank you. Okay, so I hope that made sense. I thought maybe we could do a little bit of question and answer. If you have any questions, I don't know how it usually goes. Yes.
So if you have questions, please come up here, because the way the audio works, it's all right. Stand up, come this way, please. Some of you always have good questions. Let's not lose that opportunity.
Thank you very much for that new vocabulary lesson.
Yes,
Because
it was a lot.
I think that has been a problem that we've faced for a long time. I know early on, I've been out for quite a while as a 73-year-old man. But I think when we were younger, if we met somebody that was bi, we said, "Oh, he was frustrated. He really just hasn't come out yet." You know, if somebody, and I think we, as we look back on it now, I know I didn't hear the word gay until I was almost a senior in college.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't have a vocabulary to describe ourselves and what was going on. I think, thank you, because I think you're providing us vocabulary to take a look at what's happening beyond what we've learned in the last 50 years as we become more mature sexually.
Mm-hmm.
And so thank you very much. It's been very interesting.
Oh,
helpful.
my pleasure.
Anyone else?
Thank you, Ian, again for getting up early this morning.
Yes, I'm going to
Hours
go take a
ahead of
nap.
us. I didn't know if
Yes.
you went to bed last night, but we appreciate you taking the opportunity and the time today to address us and provide this perspective, which, as Gary said, some have a long history, but you added to the vocabulary to help us interact and explain things to others that may not be as insightful.
Awesome. Well, thank you for inviting me, especially, your first virtual meeting, with a virtual guest, and your first meeting in person. And thanks for the great work you guys do.
Thank you much.
All right. I know.
Yes, I also want to reiterate, we certainly appreciate, I'm standing in the right place for the camera. You're getting up extra early this morning, earlier than we did in the Midwest. But even I was just talking. Yeah, it's plenty early. I got up extra early to make sure we could make all this work for the first meeting. And I also wanted to recognize some people, but I'll start with, I was just talking to Jonathan. I think FFBC originally during our opening comments and what we had identified FFBC was an association of gay men. And at some point we added bi and trans. And I don't know when that was, a few years ago, but the history of the 25 years, a majority of that was we were an association of gay men. So we might look back and try to figure that out at some point.
It may have been when we awarded our first scholarship to a trans.
Oh,
I think that may have come.
Jonathan just mentioned maybe when we awarded the first scholarship to a trans student. So that might be when we said, oh, we should be more inclusive. And I think your presentation highlights there are a lot more bisexual people out there. Sometimes I think it's just easier if you're bisexual and you're fine being with the opposite sex. It's easier just to say, well, I'll go that way because society says, or still, you have a lot more to deal with if you're saying you're bisexual or gay socially. More people are becoming more comfortable with coming out with the way they want to express themselves, especially very public figures, and that's spreading. And I believe it's very helpful. And as Gary Moore said, the history was, and I remember saying people would say they're bisexual and they were dismissed by the gay community. They just need to decide, you know, which their preference was. So with that, again, thank you very much, Ian. And I also want to make sure I recognize, really, our board does do a lot behind the scenes that people, our members don't realize. And I didn't mention David Wilford, our treasurer, who is at the check-in desk, has been amazing at helping us be organized. And I believe really that was instrumental in helping us raise more money this year, because we actually got our database in order and we could reach out and had correct information. So everyone on the board, if I left you out, it's not intentional because we all do so much to make this work. Coming up, speakers, we have September 3rd will be Edith Crawford, who is on the board of the Alzheimer's Association. And October 1st will be Jeff Rufus Beard, B-Y-R-D, who has taught at the University of Northern Iowa for the past 32 years. And he created the first gay and lesbian studies course in 1991. And he's been instrumental in making the UNI a more inclusive school. So I want to thank all of you for attending this morning, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend.